At first, it started as like, I feel like I need to be here as an author. And then it was like constantly scrolling, constantly swiping, constantly feeling the pressure to join in the call out. And it's like, I could be writing. I could be
Mm.
writing novels. I think I eventually came to a place of realizing that when I follow my joy, that's actually taking me on the right path.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Misshelved, your bi-weekly dose of bookstore love. I'm your host, Nicole Brinkley, and I am so excited about today's episode. If you haven't listened to the podcast before, welcome. Every 2 weeks, I introduce you to an independent bookseller in conversation with an author they love. This week's bookseller is Isis Asare.
Hi everyone, I am Isis Asare. I am CEO and founder of Sistah Sci-Fi. Sistah Sci-Fi is the first Black-owned bookstore focused on science fiction and fantasy in the US. I'm happy to be here.
Isis immediately knew who she wanted to talk to, and she is in conversation with the legendary Kacen Callender.
Hey everyone, I'm Kacen Callender. I am the author of multiple books for children and teens and adults, including National Book Award winning King and the Dragonflies and best-selling She Looks Ever After.
Settle in as these two do a deep dive on what brings them joy and what the Black experience online in the publishing world is like.
Hey Kacen, how are you?
Hey Isis, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's Wednesday and I went indoor rock climbing for the first time in a long time, so I feel really energized because of that.
Nice.
Yeah, I go indoor rock climbing. I have to mention the indoor.
That's pretty cool because that's something I've actually been wanting to look into. And I feel like that is an possible direction into one of the topics that we're going to talk about, which is self-care. Do you feel like that's a
Yes.
part of your self-care?
I definitely feel like it's part of my self-care. Like, I think in the pandemic, I spent a lot of time at home sitting in front of my laptop. And so I had to be really intentional about balancing getting out and being active. So indoor rock climbing, Zumba, sunrise walks are like foundational parts of my self-care. What about you?
Yeah, I feel that I've been really struggling with like the mind and body connection as a part of like the self-care. I feel like for the past couple of years, I've just been focusing so much on healing, but my healing has looked a lot like meditation and reading a lot of books like The Body Keeps the Score and Brene Brown, but it hasn't been as focused on moving the body. And I feel like there's like a lot of trapped energy in the body sometimes, especially the more I learn about like the ways trauma can be stored in the nervous system and all of that. So I'm trying to force myself to like give a little shake and like dance around the apartment, but it is still kind of difficult with the pandemic going on to find like public spaces for just like moving the body.
Agreed. And so you mentioned The Body Keeps Score. Did you want to give a quick one-line summary?
Oh, The Body Keeps the Score. That's by Bessel van der Kolk, and I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that, but that's a book. I haven't even actually finished it because it can be so triggering sometimes. So it's kind of like I read like one chapter every 6 months, and that's like about as much as I can take. So I'm very slowly getting through it, but it's basically about how the body really kind of like stores trauma in a way, like for PTSD, for example, in a way that at the time hadn't really been looked at. So thinking of trauma not only as like a past event, but it's still like stored in the nervous system. So it's still affecting us in the way of like flashbacks or in the way of like anxiety, like different symptoms that we think of. Like, why is it that we have those symptoms? It's because like the body remembers past events, even if it's from like childhood. So that's what I've been working on for the past couple of years. I feel like the pandemic, I talk about this a lot with multiple people, but I feel like the pandemic, as awful as it has been and continues to be also kind of forced so many of us to pause and reflect on our lives and to think about what we want our lives to look like. And for me, that was definitely a huge catalyst of forcing me to stop and like question, why is it that I struggle so much with being in a room with people? Why am I so afraid of like public speaking? Like, why do I have these panic attacks? And really forcing myself to like stop and try to heal has been life-changing for me.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love that idea of creating that space to have that insight. And what I usually say, like, it's not a gift of COVID. COVID is bad, obviously, but there are gifts of the shelter in place. And I think that time to really be introspective and allocate time to healing is one of them. So this may be off topic, but what are some of the answers that you're coming up with about like the anxiety around being around people and public speaking and etc.?
Yeah, it's been, I mean, Lord, I don't want to trauma dump. As I'll be careful of giving like too many details for that. But I think it's basically like people pleasing. Like I think that for my own safety, since I was a kid, I learned early on that I need to be a people pleaser. And I never even learned how to feel what emotions feel like in my body, let alone feel like what feels good in terms of like, yeah, that's something I want to do. I'm excited about that versus like what feels bad. As in like, no, I don't really want to do that. For all of my life and adulthood, up until a few years ago, it truly has been like hypervigilance of looking around everyone around me and seeing what is it that they need from me in order to be safe.
I mean, like that hypervigilance is so real. And I thought I had let that go and I had like a sense of like groundedness and like my mom always used to tell me like, Isis, why do you always want your way? I was like, who doesn't always want their way? So I thought I had a good sense of what I want. And then I was actually in my therapy group and I was saying something. I was like, this is me being hypervigilant. Like the people pleasing part of me just kind of activated without me even being aware of what I was doing. And that was wildly insightful for me. I was like, you know, this is a safe space. Like I see you part and you can take a rest right now. Like you can take it easy.
And I don't think I've ever really known what it felt like to take a rest, because even when I'm alone in my apartment, it's like the body, this is a society we live in where it's like the more marginalized you are, the less safe you are. And so I didn't even know what safety felt like. And actually, I thought that I was healing the people pleasing. And I had a conversation with my therapist recently that, you know, it's like sometimes you feel like you're doing well. And then sometimes your therapist says a single line that's like, oh, great, I have so much more work to do. But I was explaining to her, like when I'm giving speeches, I'll like give the speech and I'll kind of like keep an eye on the audience to see like, are they getting bored? Should I try to like cut something that I had in the speech? And so my therapist was like, oh, so you're also like people pleasing as you're giving the speech. I was like, wait, no, isn't that the point? Like you're supposed to be trying to, oh Lord, okay, I guess I need to think about the people pleasing even with speeches.
Yeah, it's hard. You don't want to be in your own space. You want it to be interactive. And then you're like, but is this interactive or is this people pleasing? And yeah. So how is that like healing your trauma impacted character development as a writer?
Yeah, that has really affected my writing in a profound way, I think, because before the healing started, I feel like as a writer, I'm sure most authors would agree, it's kind of like story and character development and character arc tends to kind of be pulled from our own lives. So whatever lesson a character needs to learn in the book tends to be like a lesson that I myself have been grappling with or questions that I myself have been asking. So before the pandemic and before kind of like all of this introspective healing started, it was sort of things that were like Felix Ever After, for example, that was I'm worthy of self-love. And, you know, that's something that took me quite a while to even get to be able to say like, I'm worthy of self-love and to have the character reflect that lesson that I've learned. But after the introspection, when you see like Larkin Kassim start a revolution, which is going to be my next YA that comes out in September, it's so much more. I feel like I love Felix. I'm not saying it's not deep at all, but I feel like for Larkin Kassim Star Revolution, it kind of like takes the question to a whole new level of, okay, you're worthy of self-love, but what does self-love look like? What does self-care look like? what does it look like in a world that wants you to hate yourself? Like, there are just so many more questions I've been asking myself that then translate into more questions that the character then asks themselves.
That's interesting because I think as a reader, I always assumed the healing came through writing as opposed to the healing happened and then it is replicated in the writing. So is my current understanding correct? Like the healing comes first and then it's reflected in the writing?
I think it could be a mix of both because definitely like Epic Love Story, for example. So Epic Love Story was basically a book where the main character didn't believe in happily ever afters and happy endings. And I myself was in that space as I was writing it. So as the main character, Nate, became convinced that, it's not necessarily that the happily ever after is the point, but rather the love and the joy that you feel along the way. That's what I started to feel as I convinced myself. So I do think that what you're saying, it can be both. Like, I'm sure there are writers who are healing as they write the characters healing too, and like figuring out their own inner thoughts. For me, what I've found is that it's easier to know how the story arc ends in my own life before I can put that onto a character. And not to say every character development arc has been completed in my own life, but I feel like, for example, with Lark, for Lark and Kasim Star Evolution, they have been going through the people-pleasing phase in a way that I might not have been able to write about a couple years ago until I got into this place of understanding how that arc is more developed in my own life first.
I got it. That makes sense to me. So when you have books that include magic and fantasy, how does that parallel to some of your lessons in healing in your real life?
Yeah, I love magic and fantasy. Queen of the Conquered is my only like pure fantasy at this point. I guess Moonflower, which is my next middle grade, has fantastical elements also. But I feel like fantasy and sci-fi, speculative fiction, is really just a real great tool of a metaphor and symbolism for what it is that we deal with in our real world. And in some ways can make it easier to see the conflicts because there's some separation. So for Moonflower, that is a story about depression and mental health and coming to a place of healing using the tool of like spirit and the spirit world and Moon's kind of like inner spirituality that begins to develop. And Queen of the Conquered is a fantasy that uses the metaphor of oppression through the stories, conflict of slavery in a fantasy world. I feel like that separation, even though that is something that was seen in the real world as well, hopefully was able to allow readers to more easily question, especially like Black readers, why it is that, for example, we might celebrate Beyonce wearing blood diamonds, which is something that happened recently. Just kind of like the intersectionalities of, though we are oppressed, there are still identities that would allow us to be the oppressor too, and having that conversation.
Yeah, I love that. Sigourney is a character that, I thought it was powerful for you to write a character who's the central character in Queen of the Conquered, that it's hard and difficult to love and appreciate her. And there's a long Q&A in the book, so we don't have to go through that here. So, but I appreciated that as a reader.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a little funny at the end to hear people struggling with like, I really hated her and I wanted to love her. I was like, no, the point was to hate her. Like, you're not really supposed to be rooting for her. She is kind of like the villain, even though she is the protagonist.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was liberating to I think a lot of modern media, like to be a Black woman in the spotlight means like we have to be perfection personified, right? Like our hair always has to be done. We always have to say the right thing. We always have to be on the right cause. Like we always have to like save like the community, the country, the planet. And Sigourney was not that. And it's like, but she could still have her story. So that was really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, everything that you just mentioned, I feel like that is in itself dehumanizing, to not allow a Black person, Black woman, anyone of any identity to be a person that makes mistakes and has to learn and grow. The issue with Sigourney is that she doesn't learn and grow. She realizes she's making mistakes and continues with them.
Yeah. You mentioned ADHD. In our email communication beforehand, I talked about I'm dyslexic. So how does like neurodiversity affect your writing? And then I can talk about how it affects my reading, or both, or
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, but I also feel like I've been talking for a long time. I'd love to ask you if it's okay. How does your neurodiversity affect your reading?
it's kind of interesting. So I mean, I think being dyslexic, like reading allows me to like kind of slow down, like
Mm,
as opposed to like engaging in a conversation real time or like consuming some other a different type of media. Um, so that really helps. I think now with technology, I can like interact with books and quote unquote read them in a lot of different ways. So I love immersive reading. So like listening to the audiobook and reading the book.
mm,
And I think like with audiobooks, I like adjusting the speeds. So I usually like speed it up a little bit, which I don't know, it allows me to process it more. And hearing it actually allows me to consume the data better because sometimes in reading the book, like how I would attempt to pronounce the word is usually like ridiculously off. So it
mm.
allows like I need additional ways to interact with the written word as somebody who identifies as dyslexic.
I love hearing about that. And I also love that you are, sorry, what's the word? Self-diagnosed. There we go. Because there's like a power in that. I feel like I don't know if this it resonates for you at all with your experience, but when I found out recently from my mom, actually, I was chatting with her, and I had been diagnosed with ADHD when I was in high school.
Mm,
Um, but she told me, actually, it was like when I was 3 years old that a teacher first said, like, hey, I think, Kacen might have autism or ADHD, something. And some testers came in and they apparently spent like just a minute with me before they decided, no, that's wrong. And they didn't really take the time to see if I might have autism or ADHD. Um, and I think about that a lot because that really could have affected, like, if I'd gotten that support from the age of 3 rather than just from high school onward, how different my learning experience might have been, how different my social experience might have been if people realized sooner that I needed that support. And there's so many stories, I think, as Black people. At the time, I was seen as like a Black girl, especially how we're just kind of like swept under the rug and just seen as difficult or, whatever it is, rather than getting the same support that we could have and should have gotten sooner. So I myself am self-diagnosed with autism because though I definitely have ADHD symptoms, I guess, symptoms is weird because even though it can be difficult in a neurotypical world, I actually feel like my brain works in a way that allows me to thrive, as
mhm.
long as I'm given that space to do so in the way that I need to. But I do also self-diagnose as autism and kind of like take that power for myself too.
Yeah. How did it feel to say that you identify as being autistic?
Yeah, it can be a little scary because I feel like I've wanted the validation to say that I am autistic, but because this can be a world where I feel like I don't know. So I haven't sought out that validation because I'm also afraid that someone's going to say that I'm not. But looking back on my own experience, where it's like I just had so many similar experiences of people who describe having autism of like, oh, that was absolutely me. It wasn't just that I didn't understand body language and social cues and like facial language for no reason. And that I kind of like developed this hypervigilance of like studying. And I would literally like sit down at picnic benches with the other students and like take notes on everything they were saying. And they were like, you're being really weird. But I was trying to like learn, like, what is it that humans do to interact with each other? Like those are just skills that never came naturally to me. And that actually became a part of like the issue of hypervigilance of like learning and studying so that I could people please, so that I could feel safe. So, neurodiversity kind of like spirals into the conversation of safety also.
Hmm. Hmm. So yeah, so I think it was really powerful for. And hopefully, this isn't out of context, but you having the bravery to come out as autistic. So then that brings me to like my other response that came up is that, like, you know, in the Black community, there's so much stigma around any type of diagnosis when it comes to neurodiversity, right? Like, it's already hard enough to navigate the educational system as a Black person, as a woman. I'm the child of immigrants. So you don't want to be like stuck in the back of the classroom, right? But I think as we sit in a society where those diagnoses of neurodivergency is really framed as a limitation as opposed to like a tool of understanding, right? So you have that understanding that you're autistic and this is how you move in the world. And these are situations that help you succeed. And that's why I feel a lot around dyslexia. Like, I'm dyslexic. So like some of my texts will make a limited amount of sense, even though I love texting, right? And this is what I need to do for the world to make sense to me. And now I can be vocal about like what I need for like those resources. Like, I love bullet point emails. And it's like anything that I can do to create structure and organization about what I see really helps my brain function. Yeah. And I can ask for that because I have that understanding, because there's all this research around the neurodiversity of dyslexia. So it can be powerful, especially it could be even more powerful is if as a society we saw it as a tool as opposed to a limitation.
Oh yeah, I felt all of that, especially asking for your needs. I feel like we're kind of raised to ignore our own needs and to figure out what it is that people around us need, especially the more marginalized you are. But I myself have been practicing so much more asking what it is, saying what it is that I need in order to feel comfortable and safe. So definitely agree to all of that.
So as you think about the different communities that you engage with, what are things that you ask for to feel emotionally safe or safe in other regards?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. I think that I have been pretty isolated during the pandemic. So I haven't had as much practice saying what it is I need in all of these situations. But I did just travel to ALA, which is the American Library Association, and another convention for the Children's Institute. I had an amazing time. I mean, it was a lot of fun, but I myself needed, and this is why I think it's so important to ground, and why I've needed to like ground and meditate and connect closer to myself, my core self, my soul, whatever it is that you want to call it, to be able to know what it is that I actually want in my body and what feels good. Because I kind of was transported to a time like going to the conventions and conferences, I mean, back to a day where it's like I didn't even know what it was that I wanted. And I was just constantly thinking like, okay, I'm here as an author and I need to be professional and I've been invited to this, and this. I need to go to everything. And my body was shutting down, especially like the more healing I've done, the more I'm feeling my body, the more I realized that as I walked into a room of like hundreds of people, I was on the verge of crying. And that's what I mean by like autistic meltdowns. It was hard. It was very, very hard. And I was afraid to say what I needed until like the very last night, where it was like I feel like it was the universe being like, the final test. This is the final boss. What are you going to do? And it was like this huge banquet with like hundreds of people, and it was very loud. And I was like on the verge of tears. And then finally, someone very kind at my table like leaned over and was like, "It's very overwhelming, isn't it?" And I like let out this breath of relief and was like, "Yes, and I'm autistic, and I'm sorry, I have to go." And they're like, "No worries, please take care of yourself." I feel like that was a moment where I was able to really take care of my needs in a way that I was not expecting, because I haven't had tests like that since the pandemic really began.
Right. And I can definitely relate, because at Children's Institute, you know, there were parties and like there were like affinity group stuff. And I had to sit with myself and like, you'll go to these sessions, you'll go to bed early, you'll get up early and like do a walk. I can't remember. It was like publisher speed dating. And I was like, it was great to like learn more about the books, but it was like so many people in this room talking. I was just like, I can't do anything else for the
Yeah.
rest of it. It was just like loud. And somehow during like shelter in place, my sensitivity to noise increased. I was like, I just need space.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel that so strongly. And then the other thing, I don't know if you were, I mean, I think that maybe we're all afraid of this, but I was like, I had my mask on the whole time, but low key, like slash high key, it was like, why am I doing this right now? Like, I'm afraid. Like, I feel like afraid and anxious. And I think I need to maybe sit with myself and question, like, how am I potentially negating my own needs because of what I'm continuing to think I need to do as an author? And maybe this is a question that everyone could be asking themselves, regardless of what their job is. But it's like, how are we kind of like forgetting what it is that we want and need because we think we have to do something,
Right. No, that's powerful. So my anxiety for all of the pandemic up until like May 9th, because I flew to another conference in DC, was like on a scale of 1 to 10, it was like a 20,000, right?
Yeah.
I had to be like, I'm always wearing a mask. I'm not eating indoors. Like, don't touch me. Don't come near me.
Yeah.
I was like, if I ain't seen you at this point in the pandemic, I don't need to see you.
Yeah.
And then May people were coming back together and like masks were optional. And then I was just like, am I crazy? Like, I don't know. And then I was like, I don't know what to, I was like, at the conferences, it's like, why are we eating indoors? Like, why are we doing all this? Like,
And there's almost like a peer pressure. Did you feel that? Like, I felt like a peer pressure almost of like, oh, everyone else took off their mask. Should I also? I think it will be nice to have a moment to kind of like ground again and figure out how I really feel, and maybe take this as like a learning opportunity to take with me in the future.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm excited. I'm like, I don't know what answers you'll come up with, but I'm excited that you're asking those questions.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think that another topic that we considered talking about is accountability versus shaming on social media. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw the question as I think my approach to communicating on social media is that I want to spend my few texts and posts celebrating anything that I'm excited about. And if I'm not excited or I think it's, shenanigans, I will just stay quiet. There is one example that I don't know if I'll actually talk about while recording that I was like, I need to respond. But most of the time, it's like, if it's, I'm not going to like essentially waste my breath, like course correcting or like calling people out. Like, there's a whole world of knowledge on Google. I'm not anybody's professor.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, in terms of the reverse, I welcome feedback because it's an opportunity to grow, especially if it's given in like from a space of like love and collective consciousness. But if it's just, BS, I'm like, I'm a swipe left.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I feel that so strongly. I think that has a lot to do also with what we've been talking about. For me, my experience was before feeling like I had to be a part of those conversations. And now I'm in a space of like, I'm tired. Like, it's the same conversations, the same mistakes. And then I start to think and feel that a lot of the time, it's a cycle that almost wants to continue happening. Like, I don't know. Have you watched the HBO Max documentary 15 Minutes of Shame? It's a documentary that delves into this topic, I think, in such a brilliant way, but it talks a lot about like the history of shaming and how it is that we kind of like as a collective have always kind of been addicted to shaming, and how social media has become more of a tool of that. And I do think that sometimes there is like accountability, the question of whether this is about accountability or if it's a question of shaming comes up, and it's not really like looked at or inspected in a way that it could be. But then it also is like such a nuanced and honestly like potentially dangerous if it's not like taken very carefully conversation, because oftentimes that is used as an excuse of, oh, you're bullying us, rather than like we're actually asking you for accountability.
Yeah, and it's like it relates to like a question that I'm asking myself now. I was in my therapy group and we had this race-based conversation and then I was like I left and then I was like now I'm currently asking myself the question, am I constantly hunting for microaggressions amongst white people? And is that serving me? And what is that part that feels the need to do this? Right? Like, do I feel like this is my battle line to end all institutionalized racism? And I don't know, right? Part of me feels like if I'm not like active and seeking it out and calling it out, like I'm not being like a real Black person. Part of me's like
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I just feel that. I understand.
you're being a fake Black person right now. It's like I don't really think it works that way. But I'm like, it's not serving me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not serving other Black people. It's not serving, people who aren't Black.
Yeah.
Are there better ways for me to use my energy?
That question, are there better ways to use my energy? Really, that's the same conclusion I came to. And I think that really changed my life, because I was like the same kind of person I'm talking about, like being addicted to social media. And, at first it started as like, I feel like I need to be here as an author. And then it was like constantly scrolling, constantly swiping, constantly feeling the pressure to join in the call out. And it's like, I could be writing. I could be writing novels. I think I eventually came to a place of realizing that when I follow my joy, that's actually taking me on the right path. And I had to realize that wasn't what was bringing me joy. And the question that you're asking of like, is this actually serving Black people? That's like another thing I had to realize, is that this is a systemic issue that needs a lot more care and attention than jumping on the one white person on Twitter who, granted, said something silly, but, probably can't be blamed for all of the issues across publishing,
Right.
Yeah.
I think the one call out I have done is that a major magazine did an Afrofuturism post, and I was like, I swear they got this definition of Afrofuturism from Google, and it's like some random references. As like, next time you decide to do a post on Afrofuturism, maybe reach out to people in the community. But usually it's more about focusing on what in cyberspace I feel like deserves my attention, in a positive way. Like, what excites me? What brings me joy? What am I like just thrilled that somebody took the time to write or sing or paint or sculpt or just like in general create, right? I'm not a creator, so like that creation process is just like it's literally magic to me. So yeah.
It's literally magic to me also. I do think that that's the definition of magic, is like creation and bringing something into the world that did not exist before. And kind of like, as creators, I feel like writers are basically like these channels where, as long as I can get out of my own way of feeling like I'm the ego of the author and just allow whatever it is that wants to be created to come through and get onto the page, then I'm good. And usually that feeling is very joyful. Can I ask you what does bring you joy and excitement these days?
Mm, um, oh dear, so much. So any opportunity that I get to celebrate Black creators brings me joy. Connecting with people who like are also really excited about like Black science fiction across media, so like books or TV shows, that brings me joy. This is going to sound so oddly specific, but like watching episode 6 of The Man Who Fell to Earth brought me so much joy. I was like, oh my God, these writers are so talented. Listening to a good Afrobeat playlist brings me joy. And so this winter was like, I felt so lonely and isolated. My therapist, we had a like random session. She's like, "Is this, are you okay?" And when she asked the question, I was like, I got off the phone. I was like, maybe I'm not okay. But it sparked a whole exploration of like being intentional about building like an in-person community. So like now, like having a community that I can talk about all parts of my identity. Everything from like working a 12-step program to right now, I think I'm identifying as practicing polyamory, and them creating space for that exploration also brings me a lot of joy.
Oh.
So that was a very long-winded answer, but I'll return that question.
You're speaking to the king of long-winded, so that's okay. What brings me joy these days? I just moved to Los Angeles, and I don't know how long I'll be here, but really building community in a way that I hadn't been able to, queer and trans community, in a way that I hadn't been able to while I was in St. Thomas. I feel like I'm trying to meet and create as many connections as possible while I'm here so that if I do end up leaving in a year, hopefully I can just bring all of my community with me and we can find like a lovely cabin by the woods somewhere and just live in peace. That's my dream.
I love that dream. Sign me up for that dream.
Me too. And I also have been trying to make a habit of like speaking my dreams out loud because I'm like, listen, maybe that'll make it come sooner, but I just want my giant bathtub that's surrounded by houseplants and has like incense and candles and it's super quiet. So quiet you can hear like an owl hooting in the distance. That's my dream right now.
That sounds fabulous.
It does. Yeah, I think that brings me joy. I've also, I always wanted to be an illustrator when I was younger. My dream was actually to be like a graphic novelist, a comic book illustrator. And then I made the mistake in college of deciding that I can only do either writing or art. It can't be both in order to be truly good at one of them. And maybe I won't say mistake. Like I think my story has been up until this point, that was a mistake, but maybe this was the path I was meant to be on and able in order to get to where I am now. But I've been so afraid of trying to go back, but I finally like started doing introduction to figure drawing. I'm finally getting back into illustration. And it might take me a few years, but I think I'm like on the track to potentially create my own graphic novel.
I love that. I love that. That like just hearing that brings me so much joy.
So we're out of time, but thank you so much, Isis, for chatting with me. So you can find me, Kacen, at kacencallender.com, my website. I am on Twitter sparingly. My handle is Kacen Callender there also. And what about you, Isis?
You can find Sistah Sci-Fi at www.sistersci-fi.com, and it's Sistah Sci-Fi on all the socials. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, TikTok, and I may have forgotten a couple, but yeah, you can find us anywhere in cyberspace.
Thank you so much to Isis and Kacen for taking the time, and as always, a big thank you to my technical editor, Rebecca. You will notice that I had promised you all Nicole Lintemuth and Kelly Yang this episode. Technical issues abounded, which is why I must thank Rebecca for pivoting so quickly. But next episode, finally, we will have Nicole and Kelly in conversation. It's almost perfectly time for Banned Books Week, and considering they spend a lot of time talking about banned books, I think it'll be great timing if by accident. If you like what we do, you can always follow us on Twitter and Instagram at MisshelvedPod. Since this is our last season, we are spotlighting other bookish podcasts we think you might enjoy. So if you haven't checked out our friends over at Books in the City, why not do that? It's 4 readers in conversation with each other, and they are an absolute delight. I've had the pleasure of guesting on one of their episodes, so you can go check that out. But they're just a lot of fun. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, happy reading.